Hello, YouTubers and NFL fans everywhere. This is Matt, the NFL Fanatic, giving you my Week 13, 2022 NFL predictions. Well, I hope everybody that it was in the U.S. enjoyed their Thanksgiving holiday and weekend. I did. I had a great time with my family. Had a nice full meal. Got to watch two of the big football games. Most of the Cowboys Giants game. I had to look at the highlights because I was having a good time with my family, but I didn't see what happened there. But I hope everybody enjoyed their Thanksgiving holiday weekend. I hope a lot of people that's watching this video got a lot of good Black Friday shopping in or Cyber Monday deals that are going on today. So get ready for the last 4 weeks of the holiday season before the new year begins. And what am I thankful for this past week? I am thankful that I had another winning weekend for my against the spread and straight up picks. So this week so far, against the spread and straight up against the spread, I went 8-7, and straight up I went 11-4. I should have, and I'm not going to counter because I did not make an official announcement before the game, but I do remember acknowledging that if Justin Fields was not in the game yesterday, I would have taken the Jets -4. I did not make a formal and official note of that, so I'm going to count the game as Chicago +4, which was wrong. But yeah, so that means that I was against the spread 8-7 and straight up 11-4. That equals up to 53.3% against the spread, and straight up that is 73.3%. So a nice 20% difference there. And now overall for the year, entering game 180, I am now 87-87. I'm 87-87-5 against the spread, which equals 50% with 5 pushes. And straight up now, I am 107-71-1 straight up for the year. That equals, I am finally, after all this time, up to 60.1%. I crossed the 59% threshold. I'm in the 60s. Let's see, with 6 weeks to go, let's see how far I can push that and get up maybe to my usual yearly average of 63 to 60, at 65%. So hopefully it's a strong push. I definitely think I can get to 62, 63, but we'll see. But getting back up to 60% straight up, I will gladly take that. But what a wild week of games in the NFL. All 4 of my losses. The Browns-Bucks game went into overtime. Raiders-Seahawks went into overtime. Ravens-Jags came down to the last second. And the worst game I had of the whole weekend was the Broncos-Panthers game, which was a genuine 50-50 coin flip. But the Denver Broncos proved that they are the worst offense in the National Football League, bar none. So I will fully concede that one. That was probably my worst loss of the week. But then you just look around the league. The Commanders, after the 1-4 start they had, they've won 6 games. They've won 6 of their last 7, and after what happened with the Seahawks, giving up for the second time this year 40-plus points, the Commanders are now the 7th seed in the NFC wildcard playoff picture, which means the entire NFC East, as of today, hold 4 of the 7 playoff spots. I don't think anybody would have expected that at all. They would have thought 2 teams in the 2 teams in the Cowboys and the Eagles possibly holding playoff spots. Not all 4 of them in the spots they are at, so that was a crazy turn of events. You had the dawn of Mike White lightning. They found lightning in a bottle. Mike White coming into the game in a rainy day at MetLife and played a very good game. He was 22 of 28, about a little over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Fun fact: over the last 2 years, Joe Flacco and Mike White are the only quarterbacks for the Jets that have thrown for 3 touchdowns in a game. Zach Wilson, their number 2 overall pick, that was supposed to be the franchise quarterback, he has never done that. And I think, honestly, with how Mike played, I believe Mike White should be the quarterback for the rest of the year. He was that good. He was that effective. And if you honestly think about it, if Mike White didn't get hurt against the Colts last year, before Josh Johnson and everything came in, I really wonder if Mike White would have had the job moving into next year, moving into this year, if it wasn't for the injury. So I'm going to give a quick shout out to there. Also, the Bears, very quick reminder. So since they've traded away Robert Quinn and Roquan Smith, their defense has given up 28.5 points per game. So, yeah. Even though, I know Fields wasn't there, that's not something to be very proud of, Chicago, that your defense, the monsters of the Midway, have become you know, the midway to the highway for offenses. Just how easy it's going. So there was that game. The Eagles having their second most rushing yards in franchise history, most rushing yards since 1948, with 336 rushing yards. And by the way, that was the year. Fun fact: in 1948, the Eagles won the NFL championship. So maybe that's a precursor to an omen for this year. And also for Jalen Hurts, I want to give him some credit. He became the fourth quarterback in the Super Bowl era to have 150 passing yards and 150 plus rushing yards, joining Lamar Jackson, Colin Kaepernick, and Michael Vick in that category. So job well done to him. And the Green Bay Packers, they have 500 yards of offense. Rodgers had two very awkward picks, including one. One was to Reed Blankenship, and I think the other one was another tip to, I believe, Epps. And then he hurt his oblique, and Jordan Love actually came in 6-9 for over 100 yards and gave Christian Watson his 6th touchdown in the last 3 games. I honestly think the Packers should just bench Aaron Rodgers for the rest of the year. He already had a broken thumb, he mentioned last week on the Pat McAfee interview he does every Tuesday. So he broke his thumb. He has this oblique injury now. He felt like he had a punctured lung. The X-ray showed that there wasn't anything there. And I feel like it's a sad cause for the Packers. There's no point in putting Rodgers out there. Let Rodgers heal up and then think about the future of the Packers, which is very key because I do think that Jordan Love, it's more likely than not that Jordan Love next year is the Packers starting quarterback instead of Aaron Rodgers. And I genuinely believe that for a multitude of reasons. And if you have any questions, you can put a comment down below. And I'll mention some of the other games as I go through my picks. But let me get into my picks. But this week, before that, there are 2 byes this week. There's only one more week of a big 6-team bye week next week. But this week, only the Arizona Cardinals and the Carolina Panthers are on byes. So if you have Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, James Conner, Hollywood Brown, Panthers defense, Eddie Pinheiro, DJ Moore, if you have any of those players in your fantasy teams, bench them because they will not be playing this weekend. Alright, so time for my picks. So this Thursday, when the 8-3 Buffalo Bills travel to New England to take on the 6-5 New England Patriots, the Buffalo Bills are 5.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Buffalo here minus 5.5 and Buffalo straight up. Then on Sunday, when the 4-7 or 3-8 Pittsburgh Steelers travel to Atlanta to take on the 5-7 Atlanta Falcons, the Atlanta Falcons are 1.5-point favorites in this game. Give me the Atlanta Falcons here, minus 1.5, and the Atlanta Falcons straight up. Then the next game, when the 4-7 Green Bay Packers, the 4-8 Green Bay Packers travel to Chicago to take on the 3-9 Chicago Bears. What a doozy of a game that is, how sad that is. The Green Bay Packers are 3-point favorites in this game. Give me the Green Bay Packers here, minus 3, and the Green Bay Packers straight up. And that will be, I will take Green Bay instead of last week, instead of maybe waffling or changing my pick. I will take the Green Bay Packers regardless if it's Jordan Love or Aaron Rodgers starting this week. I will take Green Bay. I will lay the points down either way. So once again, give me Green Bay here, minus 3, and Green Bay straight up. Then the next game, when the 4-7 Jacksonville Jaguars travel to Detroit to take on the 4-7 Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions are 1-point favorites in this game. I'm actually very surprised here. Because after the way Jacksonville beat Baltimore and the way the Lions once again collapsed against the Bills, I honestly thought the Jags would be a little bit more of a favorite. I thought maybe a 2 to 3 point spread in Jacksonville's way, just because of how impressive it was. But it's literally a pick'em game, and I'm going to take the underdog in this one, and probably my biggest pure upset of the weekend outright. I'm going to take Jacksonville here, +1, and Jacksonville straight up. Then the next game, when the 7-4 New York Jets travel to Minnesota, take on the 9-2 Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings are 3-point favorites in this game. Give me Minnesota here, minus 3, and Minnesota straight up. Then the next game, when the 7-5 Washington Commanders travel to New York to take on the 7-4 New York Football Giants. The Washington Commanders are 1.5-point favorites in this game. Give me the Washington Commanders here, minus 1.5, and the Washington Commanders straight up. Then the next game, when the 7-4 Tennessee Titans travel to Philadelphia to take on the 10-1 best team in the NFL, Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles are 6.5-point favorites once again this week in their game against the Tennessee Titans. And once again, just like last week against Green Bay, I will take Philadelphia here, minus 6.5, and Philadelphia straight up. Then the next game, when the 3-8 Denver Broncos travel to Baltimore to take on the 7-4 Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens are 8-point favorites in this game. Give me the Baltimore Ravens here, minus 8, and the Baltimore Ravens straight up. Then the next game, when the 4-7 Cleveland Browns travel to Houston to take on the 1-9-1 Houston Texans. The Cleveland Browns are 7-point favorites in this game. Give me the Cleveland Browns here, minus 7, and the Cleveland Browns straight up. Then the next game, when the 6-5 Seattle Seahawks travel to Los Angeles to take on the 3-8 Los Angeles Rams. The Seattle Seahawks are 4.5-point favorites in this game. Give me the Seattle Seahawks here, minus 4.5, and Seattle Seahawks straight up. Then the next game, and one of the two big games of the entire weekend, when the 8-3 Miami Dolphins travel to San Francisco to take on the 7-4 San Francisco 49ers. The San Francisco 49ers are 3.5-point favorites in this game. I think this game is too very close to call in my opinion. So give me the San Francisco 49ers here to win straight up. But I'm going to take the Miami Dolphins plus 3.5. Then the next game, when the 9-2 Kansas City Chiefs travel to Cincinnati to take on the 7-4 Cincinnati Bengals. The Kansas City Chiefs are 3-point favorites in this game. Give me Kansas City here, minus 3, and Kansas City straight up. Then the next game, when the 6-5 Los Angeles Chargers travel to Las Vegas to take on the 4-7 Las Vegas Raiders. The Los Angeles Chargers are 2.5-point favorites in this game. Give me the Los Angeles Chargers here, minus 2.5, and the Los Angeles Chargers straight up. Then the next game, on the Sunday Night Football game, when the 5-5-1 Indianapolis Colts or 4-6-1 Indianapolis Colts travel to Dallas to take on the 8-3 Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys are 9.5-point favorites in this game. Give me the Dallas Cowboys here to win straight up, but I'm going to take Indianapolis plus 9.5. And then finally, in the Monday night game, when the 4-8 New Orleans Saints travel to Tampa Bay to take on the 5-6 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 6-point favorites in this game. Give me the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here to win straight up, but I'm going to take New Orleans plus 6. All right, it's time for my quick thoughts on each game. The Buffalo Bills over the New England Patriots. Man, this is a very interesting game. Because the Buffalo Bills, ever since that game against the Jets, they had that big high against the Chiefs, and they started to roll down. But ever since that game against the Jets, the last 4 weeks of Bills football hasn't been the most stellar. It hasn't been. I do want to give Josh Allen a little bit of some props. So far, throughout his career at this point, he has 163 combined touchdowns. He's the fourth player, I believe they said during the Thanksgiving broadcast, to have 125 plus passing touchdowns, 30 plus rushing touchdowns, and 1 receiving touchdown in his career. And I'm going to give Stephon Diggs credit. He carried the load, especially on that last drive, making 2 big clutch catches that got the Bills in the field goal range. And Stephon Diggs has double the receptions of the next 2 Bills wide receivers combined. So, and you look at the Bills, Josh Allen's still their leading rusher. And since Tom Brady has left New England, the Buffalo Bills have gone up to New England 2 times, and they have won both games. So they're 2-0 since Brady's left in New England. And I just look at the Patriots and go, look at what happened the other day. Or on Thanksgiving. Mac Jones had a career high in passing yards, about 328 yards, 2 touchdowns. Pretty much one of the best games of his career, if not the best statistical game of his entire career. But their defense could not stop anything. Kirk Cousins, this was a genuine stat that was really impressive. He had the second highest completion percentage overall against the Bill Belichick defense in his entire coaching tenure. So, that shows you how weak or how, deadly accurate Kirk Cousins was the entire game on Thanksgiving. And also, there was very bad special team miscues. That kickoff return from Nene and Edwaga, and I know I said his name horribly wrong, and anybody who can tell me the proper way to say it, I would greatly appreciate it. He scored the first special teams touchdown the Patriots given up since Week 13 of the 2015 season, when Darren Sproles had an 89-yard punt return for the Eagles in their 35-31 victory over the Patriots back then. And it's one of those things where when you look at this game, the Bills, look, their secondary's banged up. Their offensive line's doing okay, but Von Miller's down with a lateral meniscus injury. He could be he's out indefinitely. He's definitely out this week, but they don't know how that's going to go. And look, the last time, the Bills and Pats, Belichick's always given Josh Allen a tough time and tough fits however he's playing. However, just looking at the sense of what Josh Allen has been able to do, the rest they have, and the confidence they have over that victory and the emotional high of that, I believe the Bills can win this game off of that. And to be fair, when Mac went up to Buffalo last year, that was the immortal 3-pass game where they ran the ball down the Bills' throat, and they really couldn't stop them running the ball. I do think the Bills are going to try to, or the Pats are going to try throwing the ball a bit more, especially against a banged up secondary and what the Bills have. But I just think at the end of the day, with Josh Allen, the last game he played against the Patriots, he had 5 touchdowns, nearly a perfect game. I don't think he's going to play nearly as well in that regard, but I think just even with the injuries, the Bills just have way more offensive talent, a better, more mobile quarterback, and I just trust the Bills to make a few more plays against the Pats receivers, which are very few and far lacking besides Hunter Henry and Devontae Parker. So, yep. So that's why I like Buffalo here, -5.5, and Buffalo straight up. The next game, the Atlanta Falcons over the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is one to where, when you look at the Atlanta Falcons, they're not a bad team, and they're very fortunate they are in the division they are in, because they are still, after all this time and how mediocre they've been, they're still a mediocre, they're still only a half game back of the NFC South. And I will give Atlanta this. They have been very good in running the football. They've had 5 straight games of over 135 rushing yards. The problem is Marcus Mariota has not been able to really move the ball through the air, which has basically killed the offensive momentum of the game. They've had 4 straight games of under 170 passing yards during this run here. So they have been able to run the ball with Caleb Huntley, Tyler Algier, and Cordero Patterson very well, but they really can't pass the ball. Where still Amike Zaccheaus, I know that's his last name, I can say that right. He's still the Falcons' leading receiver, ladies and gentlemen, with only 465 receiving yards this year. And Kyle Pitts, and here's the funny thing, Kyle Pitts, even with him being on the IR, I genuinely believe that the Kyle Pitts could still be 3rd in receiving for the Falcons with how bad they have been offensively through the air. And look, you're playing the Steelers, who are coming off a very interesting game. They come off the win against New Orleans, and they play the Bengals. They play a really good first half, take a 3-point lead, but then they're held to 10 points and less than 140 yards in the second half combined. I do want to give Najee some credit. He did have his first 2-touchdown game, and TJ Watt definitely helped cause havoc. I remember last week's video. Joe Burrow, who's been great basically every other game besides Pittsburgh. He has 7 turnovers against Pittsburgh, and 3 turnovers the rest of the rest of the games he's played. And I'm going to give Matthew Wright, the former Jags and Chiefs kicker. He's not doing bad. He's 5-7 at field goals since Chris Boswell went down with his groin injury. And look, we'll see what happens tonight. If Pittsburgh could beat Indianapolis, I might change my pick, but I don't think they will. And I'm just going to trust that Mariota and this Falcons roster with the defense they have, who has shown promise. And if it comes down to kicking, I'll trust Koo over Wright. I just trust this Falcons team to be able to run the ball enough, and for Mariota to find the weapons with his legs, that I just don't think Pickett will be able to mimic or match or play at a consistent way to keep up. Could the Steelers win this game? Sure. Mariota turns into a turnover machine or just makes those timely bad turnovers, yeah, then absolutely I believe the Steelers will have a chance. I just think Mariota plays a more cleaner game and a more crisper game, and I just don't think Pittsburgh has enough offensive firepower to move the ball against a okay Atlanta secondary, but for Kenny Pickett entering his 5th or 6th game, that'll be a challenge. So that's why I like Pittsburgh here, -1.5, and Pittsburgh straight up. The next game, the Green Bay Packers over the Chicago Bears. This is one to where, look, the Philadelphia Eagles ran the ball down the proverbial throat of the Green Bay Packers. They gave up 336 rushing yards. Like I said before, it is the most rushing yards the Packers have given up since the 2019 NFC Championship game, which they lost to San Francisco 38-9 in the immortal Jimmy Garoppolo only throws 8 passes to win game. And when you look at the Packers, look, they're at least been able to run the ball. Dillon and Jones have been able to find a good enough run game to get them into the top half of the league in terms of overall rushing yards. But the Packers are at a point that is very rare for Aaron Rodgers. For only the second time in his career, for the first time since his third year in the league, his rookie season as a starter, Aaron Rodgers has lost 7 of his last 8 starts. And I look at it saying that Aaron Rodgers is an all-time great. He had nothing else to prove statistically, pass-wise, touchdown-wise, tangible-wise, MVP-wise. He's already, one of the great quarterbacks of all time. A top, I would say, 15 to 20 quarterback of all time, in my opinion. Okay, and you could, and he has nothing else to prove. However, just looking at his body language, just looking at how sad it is, he has all these different injuries. Why is he even playing these games? I know he said they're, mathematically alive, and look, I love numbers, but even Aaron Rodgers has that tiny of a chance to really make the playoffs, and, I would just let Jordan Love ride it out. Just get surgery on your thumb, rest your oblique, check your lung. Like, you don't need to play. It's already bad enough, and you had an okay year in terms of, overall numbers. It's a pretty good year, but for Aaron Rodgers, it was an okay year. And look, the Bears, as he yelled last year, I still owned them. The Packers and the games Rodgers played, they're 23-5. And I just think with the injury to Justin Fields still being a big concern, if Justin Fields does not play that game, I do think the Packers can win with Jordan Love. Because here's the fun thing. After the Bears got that touchdown from the missed field goal from the Jets, the Bears, for the rest of the game, had 145 total yards offense the rest of the game. And now with Mooney being out, maybe again, Cole Kmet, if that's their best weapon, they put Amos and Savage back there. Those two should be able to knock out Cole Kmet, and you're just telling Trevor Siemian or Peterman to chase Claypool. As big and tall as Claypool is, he hasn't been really that effective in this Bears offense. That was even with Fields there. I just think the Packers can win this game with a consistent run game. They pounded the crap out of the rock the last time they played the Bears. Fields only completed 7 passes. I do think he completes more passes if he plays, but I just think the Packers are just clearly the more consistent and more talented team around them than the Bears are without Justin Fields and without Mooney. And that lack of defense. So, should be an interesting game. If it's Fields against Love, then I do think the Bears have a shot. I'll probably still take the Packers, like I said, regardless. But I will give the Bears a much more fighting chance if Justin Fields can come back for them in that game. So, that's why I like Green Bay here, -3, and Green Bay straight up. The next game, the Jacksonville Jaguars over the Detroit Lions. This game is a story about how the Jags... Remember a few weeks ago, everybody, when the Jags came back with a 17-0 deficit to beat the Raiders 27-20? Well, that was only their second win in about 118 tries in making that kind of deficit come back and win. The Ravens, unfortunately, just like the Dolphins in 2007, unfortunately now have a 1 in their name because that was the first time in Jaguars franchise history that they won a game after trailing in the final minute of the regulation. They won 28-27 off a 2-point conversion from Zay Jones, who had a career high, 12 receptions for $145. He was the most, big impactful player outside of Marvin Jones, catching that incredible touchdown. And I'm one of those people, as a Ravens fan, I will acknowledge the shin counts before the knee. That does. And I was really impressed with how they played that game. I was really impressed how consistent they were. They won their game having their lowest amount of rushing yards as a team. Travis Etienne only, I believe, had 2 carries for 3 yards, and then he left the game with foot injury. He could have come back in, but the Jags were kind of feeling comfortable that they could move the ball with Trevor Lawrence anyway. And I think for the Jags, that was a franchise-turning victory, maybe for the first time in a while, that they're moving in the right direction with Doug Peterson and William Lawrence at quarterback. And the Lions, they played a good game again. Michael Badgley, Jim Nance, as everybody in Detroit mad. Jim Nance, right before Badgley made the kick, he said, Michael Badgley has not missed a kick this year. It was a 29-yard kick. He should have easily made it, but he missed. And then Romo got him for the announcer jinx. And the Lions also gave us safety. And the other aspect of this game, which is very interesting, is that these two teams are not very good. And that's very key in the fact of one-score games. The Jaguars are now 2-6 in one-score games. The Lions are 2-5. So, so you could argue this game is going to be very close, regardless of how the game goes or whoever wins. Just who can make the one play or who can cause the other team to make another mistake. And I'm going to give Amon-Ra St. Brown, the Lions receiver, who is clearly the best receiver on that team. He has 30-plus more receptions and nearly 350 more receiving yards than the next closest wide receiver in Khalif Raymond. And, like I said, in this game, I honestly was going to go with the Lions because I felt like, okay, bad loser, home team. I trust Dan Campbell and what I've seen out of the Lions compared to the Jags. But after they beat my team in the way they did, I have to go with Mr. William Lawrence to get a victory over the Detroit Lions. So professionally, I'll be rooting for the Jaguars. Personally, for like 5 seconds, I am rooting for the Motor City Campbells. Shout out to Athens Picks, and sorry to all Jags fans, whoever, the 50 people out there in Jacksonville, Florida, and Duval County. I am rooting for the Motor City Campbells because Trevor Lawrence was very fortunate, but that seems like that was a very lucky blip, and they were playing one of the worst secondaries and the worst fourth quarter defense in losses that you will have this year. So we'll see. But at the end of the day, with what I have to objectively see, I will take William Lawrence and his team just because they have the better quarterback and the better staff around them in this moment, and I think they win this game in a tight one. And also, again, it was an easy pick because you get the Jags with the point, too, so you just need the Jags to win outright. So that's a pretty good pick. Anybody out there, before things change, take the Jaguars with the point before that line changes. So that's all. Like Jacksonville +1 and Jacksonville straight up. The next game, the Minnesota Vikings over the New York Jets. This one is tough because this is one where you look at the Jets and Mike White has to be the guy moving forward for the Jets. And let's be honest, everybody. If Zach Wilson, after what Mike White did, was coming into this game, not crapping everybody, Mike White would have, or Zach Wilson, nobody would have given the Vikings a chance. Or I'm sorry, nobody would have given the Jets. Nobody would have given the Jets a chance if Zach Wilson was back into the lineup after his benching this week. And it's Zach Wilson against Kirk Cousins in Minnesota at 1 o'clock. Nobody would have given him a chance. Nobody. But when you look at the, Mike White effect, I actually think, and maybe I could be wrong, but I could see the percentages of maybe like the 3 to 5% that are just Jets diehards. I think that could go to 15 to 20. Because I think what you could say is Mike White could maybe play with Kirk Cousins. And if the Jets defense, which is top 6, and top in yards and points, and if they get a couple turnovers on Captain Kirk and his prone Kirkness, if you will, I think the Jets can hang around. The Jets can hang on. It was a low spread, so that's why I took the Vikings -3. But if this was a 7 or a 6 or a 7-point spread, I probably would have taken the Jets +7 on the money line. But it was 3 points. I do think I can win a 4 to 5 point game against the Vikings here. I also want to congratulate Justin Jefferson because now after the game he had against the Patriots, he is now the leading receiver in the league, and he has the most receiving yards through 3 seasons for any NFL wide receiver in history. So congratulations to him. But at the end of the day here, the Vikings they have more talent around them. They're a bit healthier. Darrisaw, they didn't have Darrisaw, and they did okay offensive line-wise. I think they have the better running game, and I can't trust Mike White, after beating up the Bears defense, the lack of it. Playing the Vikings defense is much different, even though they're not probably going to have one of their first-round picks, former Clemson cornerback Andrew Booth, who suffered a knee injury and is debating about having surgery. That could knock him out for the rest of the season, so quick information there for anybody out there that didn't know that. But, yeah, I think the Vikings, in this kind of spot, the Vikings have the better quarterback, they have the better running back, they have the better skill positions, and I just think, and look, it's kind of like Indianapolis, to where, I don't think anybody really thought that Indianapolis was going to lose to the Jets. after Mike White had his big game against the Bengals. But, you know, he ended up getting hurt and, you know, not doing bad. I do think Mike White finishes his game, but I think at the end of the day, the Jets, all they need is a competitive game, not a victory. If Mike White can beat Kirk Cousins with that roster, then job well done to the Jets. You know, they might be able to, they have found their backup quarterback, at least for the long term. And I think Zach Wilson then either gets traded or cut, and they either bring in Jimmy or Derek to compete with Mike White, or just bring in a veteran presence. Because I still think, even with as good as Mike White can play, I do not think you go into next year with just having Mike White as your quarterback. So, and if it gets into these close games, the Vikings are 8-0 in one-score games this year. They are 1-2 in games that are decided by more than 8 points. So, that's what I'll trust. If the game gets close, I'll take O'Connell and the Vikings roster to beat the Jets in a close one. So, that's why I like Minnesota here. -3 and Minnesota straight up. The next game, the Washington Commanders over the New York Giants. This is one to where, look, congratulations to Brian Robinson. First career 100-yard rushing game, and he had a nice receiving touchdown, which basically was the difference in the game. Taylor Heineke had another 2 touchdowns and an interception. He is now 5-1 for his tenure with the Commanders this year. Also for the Commanders, they have it's their second straight year of finishing 500 or better through 12 games. And one of the key things the Commanders have been able to do very well is that, to me, I look at it saying the Commanders have gone 7 straight games of forcing 1 turnover. In those 7 games, in their last 7 games, they are 6-1 in those last 7 games. So if Daniel Jones or whoever turns the ball over for the New York Giants, if the Commanders can get 1 or 2 turnovers, that will be an easy wrap-up to that game. And also, it's one of those interesting things to where, look, the Commanders' defense, it's a pretty good, stout rushing defense. They have their 8th best in rushing defense in terms of total yards, and the 3rd fewest rushing touchdowns given up is the Washington Commanders. And here's the other interesting thing that I thought of. So, you know, the Giants, who have been very much like the Vikings, or just the light version of the Vikings in terms of just ability and talent, they are now 7-2 in one-score games this year. Ironically, both losses came to Dallas Cowboys. And the other big thing about the Giants is, even though I know they got some guys coming off the IR, the Giants are just too banged up in the receiving room, the secondary room, the offensive line. Like, they have too many injuries at so many spots. And the guys that they have really going, you know, forward, you know, besides Barkley and maybe their tackle Thomas, their best wide receiver right now going into yesterday was Darius Slayton, who is a bum. Darius Slayton is a bum. Like, he's better than Kenny Galladay, but Kenny Galladay is the Russell Wilson of wide receivers, in terms of how bad that contract is. But yeah, like that's the problem. It's like, also, here's a fun fact for everybody. Saquon Barkley is the engine to this offense. When he has rushed for under 60 yards this year, they are 0-3 in those games. So that is the number that the Giants need to get to have any chance of beating the Commanders. It's 60-plus rushing yards from Saquon Barkley. They can really control the run game and play, you know, consistent offense. And Daniel Jones doesn't turn it over as much, or yet doesn't have the turnovers, because that was the big problem that hurt them in the Lions game, was the 3 turnovers he had, 2 interceptions and the fumble. And you know, so if that happens, I think the Giants will have a chance, but I think the Commanders can limit the running game with how bad the offensive line's banged up. Even though I know they can get some guys made back this week. And I just think, if you're going to come down to quarterback with the rosters and the weapons they have, Taylor Heineke right now is a better quarterback than Daniel Jones. From what I've seen out of Taylor Heineke, I'd rather have Taylor Heineke as the quarterback compared to Daniel Jones for the Commanders over the Giants. I think it should be an interesting game. It should be an entertainingly bad game, to where, like, if you're in the slugfest instead of offensive fireworks, watch Commanders Giants, because that's how kind of ugly and consistent that is going to be. Should be an interesting game. I'm going to take the Commanders. Better quarterback, more healthy, and I just trust that defense more to get to Daniel Jones, for Jones to make a few more mistakes than Heineke does. So that's why I like Washington here, -1.5, and Washington straight up. The next game, the Philadelphia Eagles over the Tennessee Titans. this is one to where, the Titans, if you can shut down Derrick Henry, you basically can win the game for the opponent. The Titans are now 1-9 for their career when Derrick Henry rushes for 38 or fewer yards in the 10 games he started. It is a 10% win percentage. Tannehill did not do a lot. He made a couple nice, timely throws, and he kind of could keep moving to chains. But here was the big difference. The Bengals were able to get in the end zone. The Bengals, outside of that 70-yard screen that Derrick Henry caught, Traylon Burks recovered the fumble on, the Titans were 0-3 in the red zone, including a bad missed 35-yard field goal from undrafted free agent Caleb Shudak, who missed a 35-yard field goal at the end of the half. That at the end of the day, I know, it was a 4-point game. It was a 4-point game, so that 3 points does not matter. It would have been a 2019 victory for Cincinnati. But still, that really could have maybe changed momentum, and it could have had the Bengals play completely differently, knowing that they would have been down 3 entering the second half, instead of having a tie game. And, hey, kudos to T. Higgins. He was the best receiver in the game. He had a big touchdown and about another 130 yards and really helped, make some big-time plays when they needed to. And P. Ryan did okay. He had a rushing touchdown, but that's what the Titans are. A good competitive out that can play against everybody in the league, but if you put them up against the top quality competition in this league, they are not going to win those big games more often than not. And here are the Eagles. They're just going to continue to roll. The Chauncey Gardner injury is very significant in my opinion. I think that'll be, a big blow to their secondary because he was arguably a defensive player of the year candidate and he was leading the league in interceptions before he got hurt. Though Reed Blankenship and Epps helped the Eagles keep, that turnover lead and turnover consistency going forward. And I think here's the one thing I would say to the Eagles is going to be the biggest problem. That the Eagles give up the 9th most rushing yards per attempt in the league. And with the offense like the Titans, that's one of the worst things you could have, is a bell cow, power, silverback type running back in Derrick Henry, who they're going to definitely feed the ball to. If they can get a 4 to 6 yard chunk every single play from Derrick Henry, this Titans team could actually go into Philadelphia and win that game. I think it'd be more impressive than the Commanders, just because of circumstance. And I do think the Titans actually provide a better matchup compared to the Commanders. You can just see that from Game 3 of this year. But so again, and also it's gonna be a big motivating game because AJ Brown gets to play his former team, and a lot of his friends are there, a lot of his former colleagues are there from his days with the Titans. I think he'll be very motivated to play a weakened Titans secondary with Jalen Hurts to just show them how big of a mistake they made, and not even trying to make a good quality, respectable offer of at least a $20 million floor when he was trying to negotiate his contract before. So. And it will be interesting, though, because it will be a hard feat for the Eagles to accomplish. The Titans have won 6 of the last 7 games against the Eagles overall. And it definitely, it will be tough and grimy. And I think Derrick Henry in the running game will be a big factor because of how bad the Eagles' run defense is in regards to per attempt. But just like with Joe Burrow and the Bengals, I'm going to take Jalen with his roster against that very banged-up secondary. And I think that Eagles' offensive line should be able to hold up. And Sanders and Gainwell and Scott should be able to run the ball. And I think Jalen with his legs will make about 4 to 7 more plays than Tannehill can, which will give the Eagles a victory for a 7-point-plus win, which will give them their 11th victory of the year, which will get them closer to their number 1 seed moving forward. So that's all like Philadelphia here. -6.5. Philadelphia straight up. The next game, the Baltimore Ravens over the Denver Broncos. Hey, I have no problem admitting I am one of the biggest Russell Wilson fans out there. But by gosh, does he suck this year. There are 20 quarterbacks this season with 300-plus pass attempts. This is according to StatMuse. Russell Wilson is 20th in touchdowns, 20th in completion percentage, and 19th in quarterback rating. Basically, besides Zach Wilson, basically the Wilsons both suck. And the only reason why Russell was a little bit better than Zach, because Russell at least has shown that he can make a deep throw or two and, a few passes. But this is Russell Wilson's worst year of his career. It is making that contract look like one of the biggest mistakes of all time, and even I, as a Russell Wilson supporter, would not have given him that extension until maybe after I'd seen him play a few games, or at least I'd seen him play this year. And then afterward, with 1 year left, if he had played well enough, then you talk about a 5-year extension. Don't give him a 5-year extension to give him a 7-year contract, that they can't even get out of for the next 3 years at least with the money. And, look, the Broncos, that was the most points they had given up in regulation all year. And I saw Mike Purcell yelling at Russell Wilson. I get that, totally. Because I'm not going to yell at the defense, they finally gave 23 points. They give it up. That was the second most points they gave up the whole year up to that point. The highest point they gave up was 32 against the Raiders. So, to me, this is one of those things that, Hackett's going to get fired at the end of this year, but Russell Wilson's going to have to do a lot of retooling, and maybe a new staff will get him motivated and put him in a system and a scenario that will showcase his talents better, because, by gosh, if he sucks again next year, even though he really can't do anything, I would seriously have to consider trying to trade Russell Wilson at that point, because some team would look at a 35-year-old Russell Wilson with their history and say, we'll take Russell Wilson off your hands just because we need somebody, even as bad as he could be. You can say, look, we got Russell Wilson, a former 10-time Pro Bowl quarterback that's, been to 2 Super Bowls, won 9 playoff games, and been one of the more consistent and durable players in the league over the past 11 seasons. And it's very interesting because, this Ravens team, they have now had 2 score leads in 3 of their 4 losses, and they blew 3 of those games. And the Ravens in the fourth quarter this year, in their 4 losses, have surrendered 63 points and have given up over 500 total yards of offense in the fourth quarter alone that have made these collapses possible. And so the interesting matchup will be the Denver Broncos have the lowest scoring offense in the NFL, and they are playing the 5th worst passing defense. The Ravens' run defense is pretty stout, but he is playing the 5th worst passing defense with the roster he has, and Russell Wilson's offensive line and his offensive firepower. This is going to be an ugly game, because either Russell Wilson's going to have maybe a renaissance game that's going to say, okay, that's the old Russ that we wish could have happened, but he was playing the Ravens, or the Ravens' pass defense is finally going to look like a legitimate pass defense that doesn't look like it gets cooked every other, couple seconds when they, face a decent quarterback. At the end of the day, look, I think Lamar, who had an okay game, completed half his passes, he had about 300 yards of scrimmage. He did have 2 nice touchdowns and a 2-point conversion. The defense let us down, but, at the end of the day, you just can't look at that Bronco team, even as good a defense as the Broncos can be, and just look at that Bronco offense and go, the Ravens, they could put up 10. Seriously. If we get a 10-point lead, and I know that's, the old thing the Ravens love to do, but seriously, if we get a 10-point lead on the Denver Broncos, we'll win this game. Because I just cannot see the Broncos even got 20. And, they, even if we could go into overtime and they put up 10, because that's what happened to them this week against the Panthers. And we have a much better overall defense or defensive front than the Carolina Panthers do. So that's why I like Denver here. That's why I like Baltimore here, -8, and Baltimore straight up. The next game, the Cleveland Browns over the Houston Texans. Hey, I'm just going to say this to everybody. Because, look, the Houston Texans, they amassed 29 total yards of offense with Kyle Allen, the quarterback. 29 through the first half. Then, the Dolphins, they literally treated the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins treated the Houston Texans as Austin Peay, as Samford. That's a small college. Miami was like Alabama or Clemson, and Houston Texans were Furman. That's how bad it was. They put Skylar Thompson and the rest of the offensive skill positions out on the field for the second half. They put up 30 points and that was enough. And even though they lost that second half, 15-0, it didn't matter. And kudos to Davis Mills. And I'm going to say this, okay? The only reason that Lovie Smith is not fired is because of the perception and context of what the Houston management will go through. Okay? And that is the only reason. You can't tell me it's merit. And even though, hey, look, I know that, and I'm one of those people, but I just think that decision was just such a stupid decision, and I'm so glad it made Lovie look like that big of an idiot, that I'd fire that man. And again, if it wasn't for their contextual issue, if you will, of their ownership and all that, Lovie Smith would be fired. But he's going to be fine because, nobody wants to yell at or everybody's gonna yell at the Texans. Up, see, they didn't give another guy Lovey's stature or Lovey's profile, a second year. So he's gonna get a second year. But boy, does that look bad. And I feel bad for whoever whatever quarterback ends up in Houston, Texas. Pep Hamilton might be the only positive thing there, but I digress. But look, the Browns, Deshaun's coming back. What a great theater game for the Cleveland Browns. To have Deshaun Watson have his first game in 700 days back against his former team, who was the worst in the league. And I will tell this to everybody. Look, Nick Chubb, third in the league in rushing yards, second in rushing touchdowns behind Jamal Williams of the Lions. The Cleveland Brownies, and as much as I don't personally like them, I gotta give the Browns this credit. The Browns can go on a 6-0 run and put themselves into the playoff picture by the end with Deshaun at quarterback. I trust that offensive line enough. Chubb's running the ball really well. Those receivers will do really well. Amari Cooper can make some massive plays. And Njoku, making one of his highlight catch of the season with that one-handed catch to basically get the game into overtime. Like this Browns team with Deshaun and the remaining part of their schedule, with how inconsistent those teams have been, or how up and down those teams have been for the Browns, I think the Browns have a chance to win out. I do. I think they can win 6 straight games to get them to 10-7. And if they don't make the playoffs, they are the scariest team that did not make the playoffs going into next year by far. With Deshaun having a full year having a full year starts prepared for him under his belt. So that's why I like Houston here or Cleveland here -7 and Cleveland here straight up. I'm surprised that was a 7-point spread after how bad the Dolphins smacked them. I'm surprised. I guess maybe with Deshaun's rusting is fair. I'm surprised only had a 7-point spread, but take that easily. Cleveland here -7 and Cleveland straight up. All right, the next game, the Seattle Seahawks over the Los Angeles Rams. This is one to where, look, the Seattle Seahawks, that was the most rushing yards they had given up. They had given up over over 300 rushing yards, I think, overall. That was the most rushing yards they had given up since Week 16 of the 2019 season against the Arizona Cardinals, in which game they lost. And I'm going to give Kenneth Walker some credit. He's had 2 rushing touchdowns, in 3 of the last 5 games. But what has been the biggest problem for the Seahawks? It's their defense. For the second time this year, they had given up 40-plus points. And Josh Jacobs went on to have a career day in terms of scrimmage yards. Let's see if I can find it here. Josh Jacobs had 303 scrimmage yards. And he had a career, I think he had 233 rushing yards, which is a career high for him. And that's the most scrimmage yards given up for a Raiders running back in franchise history. So, this is one of those things where I like what the Seahawks offense can do. And look, Geno's been playing well, though he did throw that one bad interception to Denzel Perryman, the former Charger linebacker. But I will say this, with the Seahawks now firmly out of the playoff picture, I think Geno, that $30 million contract extension that they were thinking about, or that big long-term extension they were thinking about, I would have some second thoughts, or I'd definitely lower the money. Instead of $30 million, give Geno $20 to $23 million. Because if Geno lets this down, and look, Geno's played better than Russ. And I'm not trying to, come as a Russ defender and say, oh, look how bad Geno's played. No, Geno's played a heck of a year. Career year. But looking at the stretch of games they have, if they don't make the playoffs, because that is very well possible in their final 6 games with the schedule they have left, they could miss the playoffs. And even though Pete Carroll might be able to keep his job, I don't know if Geno should be the long-term answer if they don't make the playoffs. If he makes the playoffs, you have your point. That's good. But yeah, that I don't know. But they're playing the Rams, who they're going to be the first team since the 2004 Buccaneers to have a losing record and not even make the playoffs for their Super Bowl defense. Tyler Higbee had a donut against the Chiefs defense, and they have no Allen Robinson, no Cooper Kupp, and Matthew Stafford still in a concussion protocol of his neck injury. There's no point in bringing him back either. He's hurt. Let Perkins or Wolford or whoever, and Wolford has neck injury too, let the Rams backup try. Their offensive line shot to you-know-what, and just like the Rams, I think genuinely will lose out the rest of the year. It's going to be a sad point to where the Rams went from the 2021 Super Bowl, like it's the 2020 Lakers with their championship in the bubble, to where the Lakers completely missed the playoffs with the play-in last year, and that's where the Rams are going to be this year. completely missing the playoffs entirely and having giving the Jaguars one of the best picks in the NFL draft for all the trades they made over the last several years. So that's why I'm taking the Seahawks here, even with how bad the defense is. The Rams' offense is just that inept, that weak, that hurt. That I just think the Seahawks their defense can limit whatever they have left, the corpse of their offense they have left. So that's why I like Seattle here. Pull up the number here. It was Seattle. That's why I like Seattle here -4.5 and Seattle straight up. The next game, the San Francisco 49ers over the Miami Dolphins. This is a game to where I am really excited for this game. When you look at this game, this is a great defense against a great offense. The San Francisco 49ers, for the first time since 2019, had a shutout. They shut out the Saints 13-0. That stopped the Saints streak of 332 consecutive games. The longest streak in the NFL without getting shut out got snapped by DeMeco Ryans and that Niners defense. Job well done. And they got Alvin Kamara, one of the best running backs in football, for the first time in his career, have him lose 2 fumbles in the game, which, I thought was really impressive. The Dolphins, look, they've scored 30 points in 4 straight games, and, they're rolling. Tua is third in the MVP race, solid third in the MVP conversation behind Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes. It's saying that, to me, that Tua, it's like this is the real big test. I think my problem is the Dolphins lost their big left tackle, Ron Armstead, to a pec injury. He's not out for the season, but he's going to be out for a bit of time. And I just genuinely believe that the 49ers defense, with Nick Bosa, with that pass rush, they're playing a rushing attack, which the Dolphins have been able to find a bit. But they've held 4 straight opponents to under 70 rushing yards. And you have the better quarterback and the coach against the mentor against the mentee. Jimmy Garoppolo, through his first 59 starts, has the same starting record as Steve Young. That's a genuine statistic. They put that up in the game. So again, Jimmy's not the passer that Steve is or the runner that Steve is, but Jimmy Garoppolo is one of the most winningest quarterbacks in that franchise's history, and he can definitely put the Niners in a very hard bind with the roster they have to see if they're going to bring him back for another year, or either try to get Tom Brady or Trey Lance to come in for his 3rd year. And look, this is going to be a hard game because the Dolphins, they have won 4 of the last 5 games against the Niners in this series. And I definitely think Miami has an offense, and I trust what the Dolphins have in terms of their defense. They can get some stops on Garoppolo. If the Saints defense could. Hey, look, they held the Niners to 13 points yesterday with how bad that offense was. A lot of bad miscues by the Saints. So I think the Dolphins have a bit of a chance, but not having Agba, not having some of the other defenders there, just having a weakened offensive line, I have to go with Jimmy Garoppolo, and the teacher beats the student in this type of game of coaching. And I think the Niners win just off of their defense, and Jimmy making 1 or 2 more throws, and Tua having probably his worst game since week 3 when he got hurt. So that's why I like the San Francisco 49ers here to win straight up with the Miami Dolphins +3.5. The next game, the Kansas City Chiefs over the Cincinnati Bengals. This is one to where Patrick Mahomes has the most 300-yard passing games through a player's first 7 seasons. 26 straight wins for Mahomes through the months of November and December. They held the Rams to under 200 total yards of offense. And the Bengals, look, they played well. I mentioned about T. Higgins before. The Bengals are now 3-1 without Jamar Chase. And the Bengals, here's a fun little stat something's gonna change here. Either Joe Burrow will get his first loss against Patrick Mahomes, because that is the one quarterback that Patrick Mahomes in his career, I know, they've only been around a few years, but Patrick Mahomes has never beaten Joe Burrow in a football game. Or will Patrick Mahomes' 26-game streak of November and December games come to an end against the Bengals? Fun fact for Bengals fans, the Bengals were down 11 both times against the Chiefs last year in the second half, and they were able to win both those games. So even if the Bengals are, down by about 7 to 10 points, even 12 points, Bengal fans are going to say, hey, we've been here before, we can do this again. But at the end of the day, with how bad the Bengals' offensive line is, with how dominant Chris Jones has been able to be, and I just think with Mahomes and his talent and just his confidence he's playing with right now, I think the Chiefs finally get off the schneid, because I just think the Chiefs' defensive line will get to Joe Burrow and make him have a tough time. And Ja'Marr Chase, he should be able to play, but I do not think he makes the impact that he did the last time. And that's why I'm going to go with the Chiefs. Could the Bengals win this game? Sure. I think having Joe Mixon will be huge, but I think having Piron as a runner, that's not very good. But I'm just going to trust the Chiefs' momentum. They have the motivation here. I think they have the better roster and better talent, and I've trusted the Chiefs all year more than the Bengals, in this spot. So that's why I like Kansas City here -3 and Kansas City straight up. The next game, the Los Angeles Chargers over the Las Vegas Raiders. This is one to where, look, Dicker the kicker hasn't missed all year. Justin Herbert had a great game, 274 yards and 3 touchdowns, including game-winning 2-point conversion. Kudos to the analytics nerds. You got one with Brandon Staley on that one. Good for you. I was happy you won, but, good job there. And it's just one of those things that, look, the Raiders, they played the Seahawks defense, and I know, look, the Raiders, ran over, just the Seahawks defense. The Raiders can do the same thing with the Chargers. I just think with, the Chargers, they just seem to have a better understanding, and I just think the Raiders have been very much more fortunate. 2 overtime victories back-to-back. I think this game won't get to overtime with the Raiders and Chargers. I don't believe so. I think Derek Carr will make a few more of those mistakes. That was only Derek Carr's 4th career victory with 2 or more interceptions, which is kind of, sad, but really, And I just think, again, when you look at the Chargers and Raiders, I think Herbert outplays Carr, and I think the Chargers make a few more defensive stops or get Carr to make 1 or 2 more mistakes that the Chargers will capitalize on, and I'll take Brandon Staley over McDaniels in this coaching battle. Kudos to the Raiders. They won back-to-back games. I didn't think that was going to be possible this year. But with the Chargers coming up, knowing what the Chargers have in the next 2 weeks, with Miami and Tennessee on the docket, they need this win huge to get to that last stretch of games to where they can get to 10-7 possibly and make the playoffs at the end. If the Chargers blow this game to the Raiders, be very careful because the Chargers could be out of the playoffs entirely with a 9-8 record. So that's why I like Los Angeles here, -2.5 and Los Angeles straight up. Then the final 2 games, the Dallas Cowboys over the Indianapolis Colts. Look, kudos to Schultz and Henderson scoring touchdowns. The Cowboys, Mike has set the rookie sack record, or set the multiple sacks in games record with 6 games. I think he's tied with Reggie White and Alvin Smith for that record. Dak's now won 10 straight starts against the Giants after starting 0-2 in his career his first year. Ezekiel Elliott's also been able to find the end zone much more often with 7 rushing touchdowns over the last 4 games, and he had a season high in yards, in rushing yards. They've caused the 3rd most fumbles and have the most sacks in the NFL. And I think here's the one reason why I took the Colts +9.5. The Cowboys have the 8th worst rushing defense in the NFL, and the Colts have looked better under Jeff Saturday. Like if they win this game, you're 5-5-1, or you're 5-6-1 in this spot. They're not a bad team. They're obviously motivated under Jeff Saturday, so I think they can run the ball and Ryan can make some timely throws. I do think they can make them competitive. And look, the Giants were able to come back and cover the 8.5, so definitely giving the Colts that extra point. With how the Colts are playing, I definitely could see that being possible. So that's why I like Indianapolis here, +9.5, but Dallas straight up. And finally, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers over the New Orleans Saints. This is one to me where the Bucs, I just can't trust that Saints offense to really do anything. Brady, has 1 win against the Saints in the regular season, and Brady's offense at home against the Saints in his career has averaged 1.5 points per game in his 2 home games, which kind of stunning to me. But, I'm just going to trust Brady in this team. Like, the Saints, they might have better talent. They're playing better. And, the Bucs are coming off an embarrassing loss where Brady lost for the first time, having a 7-point lead in overtime. But at the end of the day, it's Brady at home. He's got to be motivated. And I just can't trust the Saints team. If the Saints win, I wouldn't be surprised. And also, I'm just saying, Todd Bowles, not a very good coach. And I just feel like, again, I think the Bucs defense and Brady should do enough offensively. But Todd Bowles isn't doing a very good coach. And he's not really helping with the diversity either, because he has the most diverse staff in the league. And this team looks this bad. Definitely a problem for the NFL moving forward, or definitely for those owners. Just putting it out there. So that's why I like Tampa here that's why I like Tampa here to win straight up. New Orleans +6. And those are my picks for this week. So like, comment, rate, and subscribe. Please check out the NFL YouTube Prognosticators page. to see other people like Halfmoon's Picks and Bridgewater's Finest, Andrew Warren. And until next week for my Week 14 picks, this is Matt the NFL Fanatic signing off. Until next time, everybody, so long.